Hello, this is Dr. Mike. This is for my CIS 2642 students, and this is a look at Exploit and Pivot Part 2. So this is Topic 9, and currently in the textbook for the current, at the time of this recording, is Chapter 6. And that is, of course, the CompTIA Pen Test Plus guide. And we're picking up with persistence and invasion, really looking at those two things. And we'll briefly talk about pivoting. May mention it before, but we'll talk about that thing and covering your tracks, which is actually cleanup. So these last few things we're going to talk about, again, I don't think I will go through the textbook, but I will look through a quick few slides here and we'll look at some important assets you can look at. So again, we're picking up with the fact that you've already have gotten, back to this again, right? We got some exploit that works. And we'll briefly talk about what the pivoting is. Pivoting would be you're basically going back to recon. And you're going back and you're scanning. What other assets do I have access to? A lot of times your initial landing might not be what you initially is your initial target. So it could be someone's desktop. It could be some side system, maybe an insecure firewall that you get access to, whatever it is. And what we're looking at is moving back to recon, and you can see that here in the textbook. Pivoting right here. So again, I'm clicking on here. So again, yeah. So then here's the scenario here. You find out through scanning and recon work, and you try some exploits out. You get an exploit to work, and it gives you a foothold here. Let's say, and this could be, let's say, an email server, and of course your level of access might not be that high. So we're going to look at, you might need to escalate your privileges on that system, or just it's enough access that you can keep persistence. You can always come back to it and you can kick off another scan. And maybe you find that the other firewall server here and you find there's a bypass, maybe there's a port that's open that was not open here. Maybe let's say port 22 is now open 22 to one system here, let's say. So that could be your next target. And you can look at exploits to get into here. And maybe when we get here, you might need to, again, this persistence gets tougher to keep. So it's not going to be easy to have this straight shot from your computer into here through that port. So keeping notes is very important. And this is where a persistence at your initial access is going to be key here. You want that persistence, you can come back in and redo your steps, because you're not always going to be connected. And your connection could be terminated, especially if it's a red team scenario where you're really acting like the attacker. Now let's talk about, of course, again, you are acting as a ethical hacker. So if you were to maybe get access to here, do you want to let the client know right away? Maybe. If it's a root shell and it's accessed through a very simple exploit, you might want to let them know right away. And then say, before you patch it, though, from this, let me see what access I can get from here on, because you want then test these further defenses. If you shut this out too early, you might miss something here. I know there's a lot of scribble on my page here. Let's delete that. So again, it's going to be one of those things where you need a communication channel open with your client. A root level access from the internet to a system is going to be red flag. Let them know right away. But again, there could be further accesses that you got here that you won't be able to tell if this is shut off. So there could be further vulnerabilities here that you are missing. So it's gonna be case by case basis, client by client. I probably myself would let them know pretty soon if I got it. I don't want to wait and sit, because someone else might find it and use it for malicious purposes. So again, your job is to not do no harm and protect the client. So anyways, that's a pivoting look. Again, post exploitation tools. Probably one of the biggest ones, of course, is going to be, we talked about this already, passwords. You acquire some stored passwords. You might use something like Hashcat or John the Ripper to do an offline attack. So again, maybe that initial access gets you access to maybe a password or a password database, password hashes, things like that. So again, you can brute force credentials. Hydra's a great one to try with. Metasploit has attacks. Brutus, but also Burp Suite Pro has a great way to do web-based attacks. You can load in if you already know the username, you can either load a username dictionary and a dictionary of possible passwords. And the fact that you can even do an attack that this consistently runs for hours on end without anyone stomping on you, especially in a red team setting, is something to note. You can say, well, I ran this for 2 hours. I ran an attack against an actual password and brute force dictionary attack, and and you didn't stomp on me. So that would be something. Even though I didn't get in, you might want to go and maybe change your scan, how your SOC is watching your system. So also, again, hopefully you don't need to have a password. You can maybe use some social engineering. You might be able to use some recon to find out a username that would work. And of course, you can always look for default usernames and passwords on systems, and there's tons of places you can find what the default passwords are for certain apps and certain pieces of hardware. So pivoting works in that fashion there. Again, cracking passwords, Hashcat and John the Ripper. Probably Hashcat. It comes default installed in Kali. Hashcat's very powerful. It will leverage graphic cards to run fast hashes. Ripper's slower, but it has also used, and nothing wrong using both to get two different outputs. Again, this is if you get some sort of loot. So again, we're looking at our, so you got some loot again, and don't have it here, but you get your loot. The recon itself is maybe taking that loot and running it through John the Ripper or Hashcat to find out, can I get further access, which would be sort of an exploit. Weak passwords would be the vulnerability exploit. So it sort of fits in that channel. All right, so now let's talk about the two things we're looking at. The last two things here, of course, looking at persistence and invasion. I'll briefly cover your tracks. Talk about it real quick here before we move on. Again, rules of engagement. It's very important to protect the client. This is really utmost. This is from the pen testing standard. If you modify a service, that's a pretty huge thing to do. If you gain access and have, it's good to see what kind of access you have, how you got it, and what it can do. So maybe you can say, I can read-write these files, which means I could leverage this type of persistence attack, but I'm not going to do it in the case since I am an ethical hacker. And then maybe in our contract, we're not going to do no harm. So if you modify or change anything, please document it. Make backups. You want to put things back. It's possible this could be a test system. It could be a development system. Hopefully not a development system. You don't want pen test development systems. They're really going to be a mess as it is. Even a test system. I talked about this previously. I think in a pen test. Other videos, yeah, pen testing against a test system, some clients like because you're not going to hurt their production system. I don't like it. You need a test against production. But anyways, if it is though, and whether it's test or production, always modify. Always reference whatever you modified. Again, look at your scope of work, rules of engagement. Protect that also. So again, and that's part of cleanup too, covering your tracks, which is funny. Cleanup, you want to be able to close any things you use for persistence, maybe remote shells, for example, modified services, things like that. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about covering your tracks. Now, the last two things here is persistence and invasion. So first off is invasion or escalation, actually, be more precisely. Invasion, of course, is looking at a way to get around infrastructure that can be protecting the system. So, but in escalation itself, though, again, your initial system might not be where you want to get at, and maybe it's all you need to go in and do further recon to look at and maybe do a vulnerability exploit against another system, or possibly you need to escalate your privileges. And there's two types of escalation here: horizontal, which means that you become another user, maybe with the same access, maybe not. So vertical typically talks about going up high level of access. So like going from a regular user to root user. That's a huge escalation jump right there. or Windows admin user. But maybe I'm coming in as user, Apache, and I can move over, and I'm actually able to use some sort of exploit. Maybe it's a buffer overflow, kernel exploit, something like that. I'm able to change to an actual regular user account. Hence, now I've sort of become here now. So, again, document how you got that, but realize that this might offer you different. Even though you're not really a vertical escalation, you're just still a not root user. This still might offer more items you can have access to. This might open more access than the original access user you got. So that's all escalation is. And in fact, I think it's here as an example. This is from Beyond Trust, but moving around as different users. If you're a business analyst and you can then become director of marketing, you might find some pretty decent stuff here, or you might have more access here than thought. In fact, you might find the password for other systems. For example, director of marketing might have access to the the blog. So, or a blog system they have, it could be it's used because a lot of times marketing directors or marketing people will post a lot of stuff into blogs, and of course, if you can get into some sort of blog framework, like a WordPress. I was looking for that word. WordPress, for example, you might be able to find access to WordPress might give you ways to maybe instill a cross-site script if it's not protected, things like that. So again, we don't really have full vertical escalation, but just a horizontal might open up more stuff. Vertical is pretty straightforward. I came in as a standard user, I bump up to help desk rep, and now I became Linux system root. I mean, it's pretty straightforward there. So, anyways, ways to look at this. We have tools used for this. Metasploit, you can use further attacks, exploit database attacks, or of course finding passwords and maybe able to decrypt those or unhash them and use those to get further access. Social engineering, yeah, the foothold you have might give you enough to find out information to use it in an attack. So the scenario, maybe I do get WordPress access. I put a WordPress page up and I send it maybe through some WordPress share function, and I look like I am the marketing director. So there's that circle of trust. If it came from WordPress, I came from a company WordPress and it sent this from our marketing director and has a link to something, I click on it because I'm supposed to check it out. It takes a little more time to set that kind of attack up, but you can definitely use social engineering with some levels of access. Now, maintain access. This is persistence. This is a little tougher to do. Probably the biggest one, of course, is two ones, of course, is using a remote shell, like Netcat, for example. Netcat is a great remote shell. You can use Metasploit or a Veil framework, and we'll look at that for a second, to create some sort of remote shell. You can set up a fake service. You can change a service. You maybe will fire up an existing service that's been maybe turned off, like FTP, and then you give yourself, or maybe SSH, you give yourself an SSH account. So this might work together here. And of course, if you give yourself an account, it could be just after you've done some escalation, you were able to create a standard user account. And maybe you're able to create a user account that has SSH access, or it has other some sort of form of access. So you can see how this sort of has a dotted line back to escalation. So the work here might unlock some persistence things you can do. Now, persistence itself, there's other ways to do it. The interpreter shell, there's a lot of stuff here. This is the documentation page for Rapid7. This is on interpreter. There's a lot of help guides for this. Look at the core commands. Interpreter is a way to handle shells, either establish and/or handle shells. And they have some built-in commands to get environment variables, get user IDs, grep stuff, reboot. Yeah, that's a big one for your remote computer. But yeah, there's a lot here. I'm not going to go through. Definitely want to look at that. Look at Meta Interpreter through Metasploit. You might use Veil framework. to actually create a custom payload that will give you a shell. So Veil's great for this. It comes in Kali, and it just has set it up. Here's some examples here. So Veil.py, list of tools, update, so on. There's a lot of options here. Maybe we'll do a demo for Veil. Here we're doing Veil, we're doing Invasion, interpreter, reverse TCP shell. So you might need to give it your IP address and port you want to open up. Of course, this is the local host. This would be, of course, the IP address of your system, and maybe port 444. Again, understanding after your recon what's open for attack. If port 44 is closed, maybe I'll do port 8080 because maybe 8080 is open. High level port could be open for some other service that's really of no end, but that port could be used for you since the firewall has it open. And so you use it when you're done. You can dump out your shell. You actually get the shell code, which is right here. And a lot of times you might need to actually, you can actually take that shell code, that's hexadecimal by the way, and you can use that code, paste it into an attack, or you can leverage it with other ways too. You can deliver it through a Metasploit exploit. So look at Veil, and then again, another thing too we can also is if you have a web-based attack, maybe you use Beef. So Beef has some persistence. So Beef does a little bit of both. It will give you some access. Persistence in Beef, in my experience, can be very tough though. Beef almost seems like an academic project, but it is used. It is a exploitation framework. You get someone to click on the link, it delivers this JavaScript, and it hooks into their browser. And there are persistence techniques in Beef, and I don't want to go through all of it here, but you can look at it here, persistence. It can be tough. Modern browsers are going to block a lot of ways persistence can work, but there's different ways, stealth modules and so on. But yeah, look at persistence. Look at Beef if your attack is coming from the attack vector of a web-based attack. And this could be great if maybe you had access to WordPress. I keep forgetting the name. maybe through here I end up getting access to WordPress. And again, from here I can actually post links. That link may have cross-site script with Beef, and that actually will open up some more shells, or some more. It could open me a remote access, or maybe a remote shell, or an account. Again, it can be used to further my foothold in the system. But again, it takes a little homework, takes a little work to get Beef set up. But there are ways to sort of move off. Give warnings and move off the page. There's ways to use Beef for more information gathering, and you can also use it for persistence. Again, like we talked about that already. There are hooked browsers. The browser reopens, it'll maintain that, or you can actually move off the browser process. For example, Windows, and move on to like the Windows process. Again, you remember now, any kind of endpoint protection might block this, and that's usually the problem with any kind of attack is getting around endpoint protections. And that's the invasion part there. So, talk about pivoting already. It's finding ways to get around with the foothold you already have, and that's it. Cleanup again. If you're done, this is where copious notes is very important. If you open any kind of remote shells, if you've added any kind of accounts, if you change or modified anything, if your rules of engagement allow it, keep a backup of the original one. And there's a point you might need to tell the customer, your client, about that immediate remote. If you get immediate root access through the web, I probably would inform them right away, and then maybe ask if you can get access into it through maybe a more secure channel, but have the same level of access you would have had, and then see if there's any further attacks from further pivoting, reconnaissance, and further attacks. So that's why I would approach it again. So that's it for this topic. And again, make sure you look at this and the summary of the chapter itself. And as we finish up chapter 6, we looked at understanding exploits in previous videos, leveraging those exploits, and I'll do a demo of probably here I'll do a full demo of an attack where we use interpreter shell, and so on. Anyways, thanks for watching.